And while they're doing that, before they come up on stage, I'm going to have a look at some of these tweets that we have received from you. Thank you for them. Susanna Vahelmi says, if you want to know about the future of Europe, look at the EIT. And that's a quote from Dirk Jan van den Berg, chairman of the EIT. That was a quote that got quoted a lot of times on Twitter earlier this afternoon. We had Vanessa Ricci, and she tweeted that INNOVEIT, the EIT, contributes to the knowledge triangle, education, research, and business. The @EIT Digital provides funding opportunities for activities related to the digital ecosystem of innovation. And Anna Flockett also tweeted, already, it's been a great morning with the EIT. Never seen so much amazing innovation in one room. Happy 10th birthday, EIT. Well, that's nice. If you keep on like that, Anna, you might get some cake later on. E&T magazine. That's a good magazine. 42% of the EIT award nominees are women this year, thanks to a women-only category. And apparently, Dirk Jan van den Berg had a little quote on that. He said he'd be very happy if 5 years down the line we could abolish the award. I understand where you're coming from there. It's an interesting sentiment. EIT InnoEnergy have been tweeting European taxpayers want to see results, and we've shown that with many of our supported innovations, 7 which are showcased here at EIT INNOVEIT, and who are nominated for the EIT Awards. So they're trying to make the world cleaner. That's what the EIT InnoEnergy get up to. And INNOVEIT 2018 just started in Budapest, says Alex Shalalambiddes, something like that. Wishing you good luck. To me as well, pronouncing your surname. And George Zizimosh, possibly, something like that. Voila, an artificial lung. Now, I want to see this too. Smaller than the real one, will help many millions of patients all around the world. That's one of the innovations that you'll get to see in your tour later on. I'm looking forward to seeing that one myself. So, if they're all ready, they can come out. Do you have your microphones on? Let's start introducing them, and one by one, as they get their microphones on, and we can start to bring them up on stage. So this is the Stakeholder Forum. Some of the questions, in fact, some of the themes that we've got in this debate are actually things that you put forward when you were signing up to come here. It's called EIT at 20, Powering Innovation and Addressing Societal Challenges Across Europe in the 10 years ahead. So I will be moderating this panel, and we will have on stage Taavi Madiberk. Is he around? He's here. I'll introduce him, and then they can come up on stage, and I'll let you know who they are. There he is. As seen on Euronews, Taavi Madiberk is the CEO of Skeleton Technologies, Europe's leading manufacturer and developer of ultracapacitors. We have Markkula. Is he available? There he is. The first Vice President of the European Committee of the Regions. Please go and take a seat. Taavi, I'm going to sit down there. Don't steal my seat. That's my one. Okay, there we go.
Thank you.
It's got the best water there. That one. And I'd like to invite on stage Kirsten Dunlop, the CEO of the EIT Climate-KIC. Come on up, Kirsten. We also have Nicolas Sabatier, who is the advisor to the director in charge of open innovation and open science at the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation. And lastly, we also have Frank Gielen, education director at EIT InnoEnergy and professor at the University of Ghent. Thank you very much for being here with us. Taavi, you are one of these people who's benefited from the EIT, haven't you? You've done well out of it. Tell me a little bit about you, your success story, and about the EU financing that you've had and how that's helped you.
Yes. Skeleton Technologies is the global technology leader in ultracapacitors. And what we do is that in transportation and grid and industrial, ultracapacitors can be recharged in 2 to 3 seconds and have 1 million life cycles. So they benefit batteries by increasing their lifetime and reducing the cost. And we have built, together with InnoEnergy, a customer base ranging from Danfoss, Sumitomo, Volvo Service Centers, and others. But if you look at the wider framework, when we have been through the entire ecosystem, Horizon 2020 SME support, when EIT InnoEnergy, and now latest, we did a scaling project with European Investment Bank. And this has allowed us to leverage the private financing, what we had gathered, and up to date we have invested about 50 million euros to the company. Now if I look at specifics, and I thought to myself that what perhaps sets EIT InnoEnergy aside, and I think there are three main things. Firstly, it's the industry network. But many times people think that if you have the best technology and at the same time the most cost-competitive technology, that's all it takes. But the reality is different. You need the ecosystem and customer access. When we started with InnoEnergy, our first validation customer was ABB. And I bring you a good example. Recently we signed a bus contract in Poland, and in the final negotiations phases, we were really stuck because we had to explain in Polish some really high-level technical details. And that's when we called up InnoEnergy and they came to help.
Wow.
And maybe to add to that, I would say that the fact that in a startup phase, what problems were we facing? We didn't have the money to buy the whole testing industrial infrastructure. And here, actually, InnoEnergy and EIT brought in the partners from Slovenia who helped us with that scaling, and we could focus our resources on building the business. And maybe last but not least, I think EIT is a community. And what is the most important part of a community? It's the people. And looking which people EIT brings to the table, former industry executives, entrepreneurs, and really ambitious people who want to make a change. And in Skeleton Technologies, we have one cultural value which is the most important one. And this is get shit done. This does not relate to quality of the product, but this relates to result orientation. And what I have seen from EIT and InnoEnergy is that we actually share that value. And I think that it's true to say that EIT gets shit done.
It's the GSD approach.
Yes.
Markku, you're a specialist in regions. I'm concerned. Is there a innovation divide, north, south, east, west in Europe, and what's being done to fix that?
Of course, there are many differences, and we need to work very hard. But let me link this directly to EIT, because we have a lot of experience on the operations on the local and regional level. So my key message that actually, like Michael Carl was pointing strongly in his slides, so tomorrowing your business. We should now be tomorrowing our Europe. We should be tomorrowing our cities. And that means that we need more and more cities, or let me say city-driven regions, so who are kind of tomorrowing there and forerunning this European renewal. And when I talk about cities, I'm not talking about authorities, but citizens, all educational establishments, universities, research centers, businesses, large and small. And on that we can do, and that needs, the cities need to take their new role. It's not anymore to produce certain services and so on, but enabling, catalyzing this change. And on that, so EIT can really have a huge impact. We need to be capitalizing, scaling the results of research and innovation. We have a lot of good experiences, but especially now coming from Finland, where we have been very active. By the way, if I have understood right, so we can host next fall the EIT big event there. So let's take there, what does this ecosystem mean? So it's not only EIT local KIC or collaboration co-location center being an institute, one of those many, but integrating all levels, kind of multi-level governance. And on that, so I have this message from the cities, so that we need to integrate maybe strongly politicians as well from all levels to be in a learning process with EIT. I know that, okay, the change comes very much from the young people, young entrepreneurs, doctorate students and so on, and that's what EIT is doing very well already today, but integrate more, create this synergy using different financing instruments. And when I think about the few of the key messages, I even brought one of our best success books of the Committee of the Region, so about how to be really a forerunner inventing, creating the innovation ecosystem, locally regional. We have here 30 case studies about from our members who showed us how they did or what they are now doing to be really forerunners. And I think this is what we need to do with EIT, break the silos. EIT especially can be fastening to move to fully functioning digital platform economy. EIT can do a lot in kind of creating the European partnerships. Actually, all regions have now the smart specialization strategy, the spearheads. So let's use those jointly and integrate what EIT can do. Or if we take the new multi-annual financial framework, the proposals just with us and the Parliament especially handling, so now how we define and get them approved in which format. So take just one example, Digital Europe program. So there is a good proposal of creating digital innovation hubs practically and hopefully quite fast to all regions, all more than 300 or 200 regions anyhow in Europe. So let's integrate them to work together with EIT, local KICs, especially let's take the climate. Everyone needs to have the responsibility to put the ambition level higher. We don't have a planet B. We have only this planet. We need to really save that, and that means that we need to implement faster the UN Sustainable Development Goals, all those 17 goals.
Kirsten, you have the massive task of trying to deal with climate change. I'm sure you can sort it out, but you've got a good team around you as well. How does the EIT model fit into the challenge that you're attempting to deal with?
5 things, and I was reflecting both on what's specific around the way and model like EIT enables addressing precisely the scale and pace of a climate change challenge, but also more broadly the intersections with so many of the other challenges that would enable our ways of working on climate. The first is the EIT model connects innovation to societal challenges and drivers of change. That's already been said, but I think it's actually fundamental. It's innovation in service of a thing, not innovation generally looking for possibility, but innovation with therefore the capability of connecting and catalyzing something systemic in terms of a difference. The second is EIT model asks for, indeed I would say insists, on a collaborative, interdisciplinary, cross-boundary set of conditions and exchanges. And there is a huge benefit not only in the diversity of that, but most importantly in the accelerated learning. And I think the question of, if you think about the challenge of something like climate change, this is literally about pitting ourselves against a speed and a scale of disruption that will require us to learn faster than we possibly can and faster than we've ever learned before. Third would be by recognizing that innovation to have an impact needs more than money. And this really is this question of ecosystems. It's a question of conditions, creating the conditions for innovation to achieve something which are non-linear, which are systemic, which are random, which are about serendipity and encounters, which are about supply chains and policy and regulation and the infrastructural connections that make market change possible, and industry change possible, not single point interventions possible. And actually, most importantly, trust. The formation of ecosystems, the maturation, the nurturing of ecosystems doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen automatically. Fourth point would be by providing support where support is most needed. If I speak particularly thinking from a climate change perspective, but also thinking about many of the societal challenges that we interface in through the EIT community, that is the RIS scheme, the EU13. That are the areas where, from my perspective, there is most need for accelerated change and most potential and opportunity to do something really discontinuous. Early stage market failure, early stage innovation where there just isn't anything there, or multiple valleys of death. It's not one valley of death. It's kind of a loop until you get interest from venture capital, but then there's the next cycle when you really are hitting the gap to the big institutional funding and so on. And often the kind of innovation needed to change the entire economic system that we will need for climate change, there is very little else out there doing and placing the kind of public-private systemic ecosystem bets that will change whole systems. And the last point I would make is by empowering innovation actors to set agendas that are coherent with the needs they're serving. Now, this is really about this principle of EIT itself running a portfolio of very different innovation models and different innovation communities, and that's the KICs. We're really different. But what it speaks to is the coherence between the way of dealing with innovation and the nature of the challenge we're trying to solve, where you have industry mechanics that are ready to take up, accelerate, and scale differences, where you don't have industry mechanics in place and you need to build the market dynamics, and where there's an opportunity for me, speaking as an Australian entering into a European community, where actually there's something that's very much about the European idea, self-activation, self-determination, and almost self-organization around missions within a unifying framework that allows for and makes a virtue from diversity.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks very much for those points. We'll come back on some of those, I think, probably with some of the questions. Nicolas, I'd like to get a vision from you on how you think the EIT can make a difference, particularly looking forward to the development of the European Innovation Council.
Yeah. You know, in life we have coffee and tea, water and wine. So life would be dull if you would only have water and just tea. You need the rest. And so basically so you need the EIT and then you need the rest because you have many actors for innovations. If you look at the way we have formulated the proposal for Horizon Europe, so you have a pillar for innovation with the idea that the framework program should become kind of a powerhouse for innovation, if I quote Jean-Éric Paquet, my Director General. But if you look at the pillar itself, and if you look carefully to the second action, which refers to ecosystems, plural, there is the affirmation also in the introduction that we, the Commission, we are not in the middle. We are an actor among the others. EIC is an actor among the others, like EIT, like financial institutions, like regions also. And so the idea is to try, while creating the EIC, and I will come back to that in a few seconds, the idea, first and foremost, is to try to enhance the overall innovation landscape in Europe and try to have all these actors working together, hooking together, trying to make bridge between the ecosystems so that no one remains in his own bubble, basically. Because that's one of the dangers. Now, the EIC. We need the EIC like we need the EIT because we're not doing the same thing, basically. EIC will, to make it short, will have two instruments, two main legs. One is kind of blue sky research, out of the blue, long shots, moonshots, a la DARPA. Make simple, which is called the Pathfinder. And then we have what we believe to be a future powerful instrument to try to roll out innovation onto market. How will EIT link with this? Well, how are we going to link ourselves with EIT? On the Pathfinder, the idea will be to start bottom up from any kind of crazy idea and to try to have a dynamic management of this project in portfolio and try to nurture innovation out of this. Now, some of these innovation might be quite quickly at the level of readiness where they can go to the accelerators, but others may not. EIT KICs could be interesting, an interesting way to channel this innovation through there for further work, for example. And then if you look at the accelerator, which is basically the idea that you have weaknesses in Europe, you have in addition to the East-West divide, you have a valley of death, you have a financing gap, you have risk aversity, which is structurally linked to what the EU is. We are not the US, we are the EU, it's not the same. Then we have developed a tool which goes beyond the grant and which tries to provide also the first private finance component of support. And how can we do it? Well, let's take the example of Skeleton. You were under a KIC, you had to go to the SME instrument, and then after that you had to go to InnoFin, product that we manage with EIB. 3 things. In the future, it's mentioned in the specific program, it's a footnote, I think. The idea is that we might, from the beginning, co-fund, join an action funded by the KIC through fast-track access to the accelerator, and bringing very close to the accelerator. So in other words, in addition to have some KIC support, you would enjoy at the same time, under the same process, full accelerator support, that is additional grants, the one you had on the SME, but also up to 25% of equity or 100% bank guarantee to cover the first step of TRL9, basically. So that's the kind of dynamic thing we can do, and then of course, interconnecting the ecosystems. EIT will develop its own ecosystems. For me, the KICs have to be part of it, as we should also maybe be more present into the EIT's ecosystem, of course. It's, on both sides. And that's it. And of course, what we have also to work for, and that's for Mr. Van Nistelrooy, is there is money in the framework program, and there is money in regional funding. And if you want to bring regions in, because regions are important actors of innovation, we have to find simple ways to allow for complementarity of funding when the objectives are the same. Not to divert money from one to the other. It's not the idea. But when the objectives are common, let's try to bring together the resources to make it work.
Interesting. Frank, thanks for being patient and waiting to the end, sitting down at the end. You're last to speak, to have your kind of free kick at goal. So give us your vision from where you're coming from in terms of training entrepreneurs and education for the EIT over the next 10 years.
Okay. Well, I would like to start by defining what we mean by training entrepreneurs, because too often the image is reduced to the Silicon Valley style startup funder. And it's much broader than that. And actually, when we define entrepreneurship and more entrepreneurial skill development, we're really talking about developing the capability of people to apply their know-how, their competencies, and their judgments in very uncertain conditions which are typical for innovation. And that's what it's really all about. And if you define it like this, you reach immediately a much broader audience, because everybody who is now studying or learning is confronted every day with the challenges and the fast pace of change due to innovation. So everybody wants to learn this, or needs to learn this. And in addition, the third part is that by doing or by framing it like this, you're not just talking about some specific skills, but about really the generic skills of the future. And there has been published recently a report by the World Economic Forum where they predict, or at least say, well, in 2022, what are the top 3 skills required by employers? Now, 2022, that's the people that are entering our universities today. So when they graduate, what do employers expect? First of all, number 1, analytic thinking and innovation. So innovation is there, and number 1. The second one is active learning. Not that we as educators have to provide active learning, but that students should be capable of learning themselves. And then the third one is creativity, initiative. So if you take these top 3, I would say that's a pretty good representation of skills for entrepreneurial behavior. And for me, this is where EIT should really lead and make a difference. Because if you have a discussion about those skills, the conversation with universities to change is much easier than telling them, well, your university has to pop out 20 startups per year. And that's a very different debate, and EIT can help there and is helping there to tell them we have to innovate the education system to support innovation. And it's already happening out there. I mean, if you look around you, MIT has Station 1, which is kind of a revolutionary concept for education in the future. And Stanford has a vision called Stanford 2025, where they radically flipped the coin, and they said, the creation of skills or the development of skills will be the foundation of education, not knowledge in a discipline. So we should think about this and really try to, when we say we want a broader audience, I think it's broadening the definition because it's much broader than the garage guy. And we have to broaden the support of the education providers by really positioning it well as not just a small niche of skills, but the skills of the future. And for me, that's really where EIT has a fundamental role to play.
Do you think that they should be reaching down into schools, though, to younger students?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking now mainly about higher education, but the sooner you start with this, the bigger the impact.
Because it's an attitude change that you're talking
it's
about.
really
Actually, it's a way of thinking. It's not necessarily education. It's not what you know. It's sort of how you're thinking about things. Go on.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe I would like to comment on the funding gap, what was mentioned earlier. And I think it's important that we look at the European ecosystem in terms of EIC, EIT, and EIB. Not all the EIs here. Not AIs, but EIs. I I think that we have to look at the benchmarks. And if you look at other regions like US and China, then I think US brings the best example that US usually is looked at as a good example of private market doing its work. But let's take the biggest success story, what US has in clean energy. That's Tesla. People tend to forget that in 2010, when Tesla did the IPO, it raised $220 million. But just before that, few months before that, they raised a $500 million loan from Department of Energy. So without that government intervention, Tesla would not exist as we know it today.
SpaceX is another good example. They wouldn't exist without the NASA contracts. That's all government money.
Yes, but let's see that if you talk about electrification and acceleration of that, it's clear that Tesla may be a company who basically pushes the boundaries sometimes too much, but they have changed the industry. And in 2010, Tesla would not have been possible in Europe. That's a fact. But now we see that with EIB and all the EIs coming along, we are creating a competitive ecosystem. And I think that we can never forget about that it's not a competition between European companies. It's a global competition where US and especially China are really pushing heavily.
I would like to open it up to questions, because I would like to hear from the audience. I think they've all got plenty of points of view on this and questions to ask. Please do make them questions as well. I don't want to just hear your guest lecture, but please ask a question. Put up your hand, and we've got some people with microphones who can bring them over to you, and you can ask questions freely as you wish. Don't be scared. I wanted to talk to Nicolas a little bit about this. What you were suggesting, your commissioner says that he'd like to simplify things, but what you're suggesting sounds kind of complicated.
No.
He just tweeted he wants to simplify everything going forward. He did that today, and I thought, hang on a minute.
Let me put it this way. I'm not going to enter into the details of the mechanics.
Okay.
But if Council and Parliament trust us, average time to go, no-go decision will be less than 1 month. But they have to trust us in the way to do things. Not to try to add this element, no. They have to trust us in the way to do things. So we can do things very simply if we are trusted. But to do things very simply, and in particular in disruptive innovation, the problem is that you need to have also disruptive mindset in terms of management. And so we wait to have some authorization, but we still have a lot of work to do internally, also to change the way things are done. Framework program is historically rather research-based academics. Now, you don't evaluate and select a proposal under ERC like you have to do it under EIC. No, under ERC, it's, are you one of us? Are we going to acknowledge you as a great researcher and you're one of us? And here is your medal, by the way. You are assessed on what you've done. Under EIC, for me, the Pathfinder, the question is very simple. Do you have an idea that could change the world? No, simple. And we don't care what you've done before.
Have you already got priorities that you're lining up that you think you want to get into? Have you already got priorities that you want to get into?
No, it's going to be bottom-up. It's going to be bottom-up, but there might be some top-down.
Have you got any suggestions?
I just finished on this EIC Pathfinder. Do you have an idea that can change the world? So, ambitious. Accelerator, do you have an idea that can change your world? Do you have an innovation you want to bring in market? It's different exercise.
In the white shirt, I think. Would you like to ask? Tell us your name, tell us your position, and give us your question.
Yes. Hi, I'm the guy you couldn't pronounce his surname. So my name is Alex Haralambidis. I'm a professor at the Cyprus University of Technology. We've been working with Climate-KIC over the past 2-3 years. We've joined the Regional Innovation Scheme. So my question is, how do you see small countries and remote regions playing into this whole innovation game, let's say? Because a lot of the times our startups have to leave Cyprus to go where the money is or where the industry is. So how do you see the role of small countries and regions in the whole EIT future? Thank you.
Would you like to have a go at that? Markku?
I can definitely start. So action is there in small countries, regions, whatever is the size. But I think the key metaphor, the word, what we have started to use in my city, Espoo, the western part of Helsinki metropolitan, is gardening. So it's not that you bring there something or you have a good let's say, unit for this, but how to get people engaged more on that. And with the respect to climate change and sustainable development, we have started, even our city council, we defined that we want to have all the 4 dimensions of sustainable development in our key role. So economic and ecological, of course, social and cultural. Cultural especially learning and how we can go through the whole school system and change the mindset, the mentality to be more entrepreneurial. And that's what has happened there, what we call the Espoo Innovation Garden around the Aalto University with all those big and small industries, huge
Finland is a
capacity
success case, though. I mean, he's talking about the other end of Europe.
But we have created that in a couple of years. Aalto University was established 2010, and now you are starting, and we are starting the result. Young people have created much of that.
But how do you stop? He's talking about people leaving their country in order to go somewhere else.
But you need to create this kind of mentality there. Small unit first and start creating, make it attractive at least for people who go to study or work abroad.
Should they pick a specialization and say, okay, we're going to be the best at that?
That can be part of your smart specialization that you can link with other regions more successful so far. Send your young students there for a while, but bring that attractive to come back.
Taavi, you want to say something?
Yes, I come from a country which has exactly 1.34 million inhabitants. And the point is that if you look at any European instruments, I think that we have to take a pan-European view. But I come from Estonia, and having the Horizon 2020 and EIT InnoEnergy available actually was highly helpful because the financial ecosystem in Estonia in terms of climate investments is not so well developed. And today we still operate and expand in Estonia, but we have a lot of operations also in Germany. And I think that any successful company in the global economy will not stay a regional power in whether it's region of Espoo or somewhere south of Italy or Estonia. Companies need to have a pan-European footprint if they are successful, and in the end of the day, a global footprint.
But did you feel that it was easy when you went and knocked on the door? In fact, did they knock on your door, or did you go and see them?
Actually, when it comes to EIT, they found Skeleton Technologies. And
they found you?
Yes, and offered actually the support, because it's clear that Aalto capacitor market is growing and we are slashing the CO2 emissions and fuel bills. So it was a good match, and I think this a little bit separates as well that we had the outreach capability to come to us and see what is the package, what could help us to grow.
Kirsten, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a perspective on part of the answer is also systems innovation. And I think it's something that Laurent said before. It's not necessarily, sometimes it's about the market picking up businesses and giving them a commercial dynamic and blowing it out. And then often there's the challenge around leaving and moving. But for many of the problems we're trying to solve, we need place-based solutions that build and change systems in their location. And those kinds of ecosystem plays and those kinds of market-making plays are the things that keep people with the option of staying at home if they want that.
But who takes the initiative on that?
That's us, for example. Systems innovation is precisely what a Climate-KIC is doing in the heart of an EIT community, because otherwise we cannot change for climate change. And if I look at most of what I'm seeing in many of the other KICs, it's the same thing. Ultimately, it's about changing systems.
Any questions that we have out here at the moment? Gentleman right at the back.
Hello everyone, I'm Hans Constant. I was the happy winner last year of the Venture Award. Yeah, my question is a little bit different. So my flight was delayed, so apologize if this was discussed before. But I came back from the US and there's a lot of scale-ups. So EIT is doing a terrific job, and also EIT Health helping entrepreneurs grow in the startup phase. But how about the scale-up phase? I still feel that if you go in a round B and really become big, you have to go to the USA anyway, and I don't want to. So I'd like to understand your vision and instruments to help scale up, so the next phase of the startups.
For those who are non-specialists, what's the difference between a scale-up and a startup? How do you define scale-up? Somebody give me a quick definition.
Major threshold differences in funding and impact.
Well,
So, okay. Would you like to have a go at answering the question?
The answer is that for the scale-up, it's the EIC. And that's it, and that's why the two have to hook together and work together. But so one of the missions of the EIC accelerator is indeed accelerator to scale up. That is to help the company to grow, which involves a certain level of funding, and that's where you are confronted to market adversity, risk adversity of the market, and that's what we're trying to bridge as a gap. That's the role of the EIC.
Kirsten?
And again, it's about what you're scaling.
Yeah.
So if you're scaling a particular business and you've got a track and you're going to need billions or millions, okay, that's a whole other, actually it's probably not just EIC, it's a set of pockets, taking a pan-European perspective. And if it's about scaling an impact, you're going to need a linked set of interventions, some of which are going to be supported by the types of conditions that build here, and some of which are going to be supported by the bigger injections of capital, and the marriage of the two.
Does Europe have lessons to learn from other parts of the world on this?
Certainly. That's what we are here to learn.
What we definitely can use, and we should use different instruments and more this collaboration. Again, taking the example linked to climate change. So we have a huge number of ongoing programs and projects on smart specialization. One in the Baltic Sea region, macro region, is very different from all those countries, regions who are operating together. We learn what does this ecosystem mean in collaboration. But we don't do that project separately, but we integrate more now with Climate-KIC, with the EIT Digital. So let's get that done together and look then the companies locally in energy sector. By our city, we kind of integrate the large companies like Fortum, the largest energy company who has their head office largest in Scandinavia. They have their head office in our city. So it's not only them, but a big number of small startups. So some of them move faster. We have established jointly financed by the cities, government and industry, a special foundation, Smart and Clean, to operate through concrete measures and so on, and integrate those startups, get some of them to be really fast moving.
Taavi had something to say.
Yes. From an entrepreneurial perspective, I think it's a really valid question what you ask, and it's clear that with US there's a funding cap. But I think that today, if you look at European policy with the European Investment Bank, that's what Skeleton has also used when we leverage our private financing with EIB. And where, if you look at venture debt instruments, when EIB last year deployed, I think, 1.5 billion. And of course, it's a good start. And it doesn't close the entire funding cap with US, but we are slowly getting there, and especially in the phase of scale-ups. Because I think what we have to look at, if you look at the top 10 tech companies globally, we don't have any European companies there. And we are not even close to that, so we need that type of scale-up effort, and of course policy here can help.
There's a gentleman with a microphone down there. He looks like he wants to ask a question.
Thanks. Peter Olderson, former chairman of the EIT Governing Board. I have a question for Nicolas Sabatier, because I need some help in understanding why the EIC has the need to create their own ecosystems, since EIT already has created a lot of working ecosystems covering most of the societal challenges and the emissions, and will create even more. Could you help me with understanding that?
Well, because each organization has its ecosystem. EIB has its ecosystem. Everybody has its ecosystem. We are all actors doing certain things, and by definition, we generate our own clientele and our own partnership. What we're saying is that we should avoid entering into something such as, who is in the middle? No one is in the middle. And we have to try to hook the ecosystem. So we are not necessarily building an ecosystem which is not the same as the KICs. I'm just saying we are building on our side an ecosystem that shall be very close to projects that we fund, and that we will try to bring from idea down to market, basically. We will hook with this ecosystem, but also with other ecosystems. Talk about climate change. On the 17th of October, my commissioner will sign an agreement with Bill Gates, representing Breakthrough Energy Coalition, and because we are launching next year an investment fund, a joint investment fund with them for disruptive technologies in the area of climate change. We had very active holidays this summer doing this by the pool on the phone. But I mean, there we shall create an ecosystem which shall interact with you, with us. So there is no issue here of saying, oh, there is one ecosystem. No, you have many ecosystems, including local ones. You have to make them work together. You have to hook them, connect them, because basically in those ecosystems you find the third person, always, sometimes anyway, but playing a different role. That's the idea.
We had a question down from the front. Sabatier, you were on the panel earlier.
Yeah. So this is a question that I've been wondering about. And I understand that EIT has a mandate to encourage innovation within Europe and support entrepreneurs and startups within Europe. But it may also happen that a lot of these ideas that come from within Europe will eventually move out to a different country, China, India, or Africa, for multiple reasons. For example, it happened for us because we were into agri-space, and it was simply the weather, the climate was much more congenial in India for our crop. And it was also cheaper to grow the same crop in India as compared to doing that in Europe. So both from a technical feasibility and economic feasibility perspective, it was easier to do the whole thing in India. And that kind of made us disengage from the whole EIT community back in 2013. And then I kind of got back in touch very recently. So where does those startups, fit in to the whole ecosystem that have actually, that began through the EIT or within the Europe, but they are not really based here anymore? Because we are really, looking at global challenges. The problems we are trying to solve are not limited to any particular geography. They are mainly global challenges. And does it really matter where the startup is based?
Good question. Does it matter? Go on.
So I think Kern referred before to thinking of the EIT as a startup. And I would say very much in 2010, 12, 13, this was about building a system and making it capable of working. If you look in 2018, you have a consolidated program now of outreach, setting up hubs, already a hub in Silicon Valley, hubs that are now being established in Israel, in China. Speaking just for this KIC, we're working in sub-Saharan Africa, in South America, in China, in Australia. So there are now, I think, very different conditions. And part of that has been following and working with the logic of building the momentum around transformational change, entrepreneurial education, building the ecosystems around the alumni and where they are moving, and looking from my perspective for supply chains, whole value chains. If I need to innovate agriculture in Europe, I need to be working in Africa. I need to be partnering in China and India if I'm going to be addressing construction and retrofit. So it's, I think, a fantastic challenge to us to accelerate what we're doing, because very much this notion of taking from, if I think about the conversation before, taking a whole of European perspective on Europe itself, running a portfolio logic. How do we mix and match multiple instruments, multiple incentives? How do we incentivize not just by the supply and the bottom-up push, but by the pull of financial mechanisms that pull through demand and lock it in so that we can secure supply chains and we can secure materials and data.
Isn't there a risk, though, that you create a champion and that champion decides to move outside Europe and then your investment didn't really pay off in terms of job creation in Europe?
But if your supply chains are global, then you're paying the price anyway. You're counting the cost, you're paying the price, you're sourcing the talent, you're shipping the talent. That's what we're all about. It's a connected world.
Okay.
And if I take an example on the climate change, so United Nations has now created or is in the process creating 25 cities in 5 different categories to how to speed up achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Already not only 2030 but 25. And for that we need this global collaboration. And good example where EIT is partly already, at least we've been invited on, there's a special category for city university collaboration. Our city, we are one. From Europe we have Cambridge and Heidelberg. We have India, from India we have Noida there, and then Palo Alto. And now it's very much how we can use the latest research, what should be done more in a systematic approach on reaching the goals, mentoring cities, small municipalities around the world. And we need to take that responsibility from Europe as well. And we can do Climate-KIC EIT Digital, so they seem to be now coming to our partners on that because we are not doing enough yet.
There's a gentleman at the back who's been waving at me for a while. He has his microphone back there. Would you like to ask your question? Tell us your name.
Yeah, hello. My name is Willem Jonker. I'm the CEO of one of the KICs, EIT Digital. And one of the underlying themes that I see popping up in several questions is that one of fragmentation. And our opinion is that there is too much fragmentation in Europe. And yes, it does matter to build global European companies that stay in Europe and that have their headquarters in Europe. It's very, very important. So my question is, and I like the example about Tesla, because why would the US government put a single big bet on such a shaky company? So my question is, are we prepared in Europe to make such big bets, or do we distribute the pie amongst everyone?
Who wants to answer that one?
Could we have a definition of big bets? What is the definition of big bets? I don't know. Yeah. Look, mind if I answer?
Go for it.
Okay. It's not an easy one. Fragmentation. Structurally, Europe has weaknesses which shall always be there, whatever you do. We are diverse, which is great, by the way, different languages. You have many, many things. We can reduce fragmentation when it is regulatory, and probably with regard to the next wave of disruptive innovation, we will have to tackle some regulatory aspects. But we will still retain the weaknesses which are in fact what we are. We are not the US. In the US, 80% of public expenditure for RDI is at federal level, meaning disruption of competition between states is a non-issue, basically. In the EU, it's only 10%. Meaning state aid is an issue, although we have solved the problem of state aid, but we're not going to discuss it today. But it means at the same time that if you are only 10% at EU level, 90% at the level of member states, 28 soon 27 member states, the capacity is limited. And so basically, hardly can a member state take such high bets you are referring to. They can't. I mean, some of them are not even equipped for that. So the idea of the EIC was to say, let's try to do something member states cannot do alone. Let's do it ourselves. That's why we have reduced and narrowed the scope of innovation, or the SM instrument, to disruptive innovation, basically, and market creating one, because if you want to do everything in the end, by doing everything, you do nothing. And so yes, the idea is to take bets, bets regarding technology risk, but also investment bets. I mean, one of the issues today is that you only provide grants. A director in DG Grow was telling me a few months ago that she went to Silicon Valley, accompanying 3 SMEs funded by program COSME, and they were bought by some VCs on there, and it was a great fiesta. And none of these SMEs even said in public they had been supported by the EU. It's grants, so it's investment which is lost. So under EIC, we're not going to do only grants, we're going to invest. And sometimes we're going to invest in equity. Can we take high bets? Yes, we might go, 10 million, 15 million. We will see. We will see what will be the opportunity which will be presented to us. But there is clearly the idea that if there is something into which we believe, then we have to take such risk and make such bet. That's the only way out.
Would anybody else like to have a go at answering that question? Taavi, if I ask you to make a bet, what would you make a bet on?
Skeleton technologies.
Yeah.
Already Warren Buffett has said that invest in the business what you understand, so I think it's a decent bet.
Any other comments on that one? Go on.
Just in brief add that we have a huge amount of money in public procurement. Let's use that more innovative format, so especially on these kind of forerunner issues. And that's why this one element that I was calling forerunner regions or forerunner cities to take strong action. So this is one instrument that we have in our hands.
And we are one of the few regions in the world that has a carbon price, and that carbon price is beginning to produce the money for an innovation fund and some really different scale of possibilities around the way in which we, for example, close the gap on new technologies that are able to produce the differences we need but are not yet market competitive.
Are there particular things in your area that you think are worth a bet?
Yes.
Can you give me some examples?
Some of the areas around urban retrofit, where we have a possibility of really reconverting or converting European cities and at the same time addressing digital transformation, addressing waste, energy, water, a multi-material, multi-dimensional view of the way in which we live and work and connect our resources. I think there's some fantastic opportunities there. Europe has still a set of challenges around agriculture, food, land use and forestry that we haven't really fully untapped the potential for, and there are some extraordinary technologies actually particularly coming out of southern Mediterranean and the Nordics on replacing construction with forestry materials with wood and nanocrystallization of wood. There are remarkable things. We're about to hold a summit on financial innovation, and some of the changes I heard referred to distributed ledger technology, and the difference is not just, it shouldn't just be blockchain. The distributed ledger implications with artificial intelligence, with sensors, with the way in which we put the full stack together to change, and most importantly, to engage people in their own decision making around the differences they want to see. Those things are extraordinary.
Now, if I'm going to stick to our timing, I can't take any more questions, I'm afraid, and I can see there are people who are desperate to ask questions. I've got 3 already there. But I think that we need to push on with sticking to our timing, because we've got the innovation tour coming up. We've got lots of fun things. We've got the awards and everything else. But during the coffee break, you can grab these people and ask them your questions and collar them and get a one-to-one. Please do that. But we're going to start to wind this up with 3 words that describe your vision of the EIT 10 years ahead. Frank, would you like to give me your 3 words?
Big bet on education.
Key player and partner of the Innovative Europe.
Okay.
Agile, systemic, courageous.
I would put leading European future. EIT should be that.
Okay.
20 billion companies in 20 years.
That's a great vision.
Yes. 20.
Great. You can sign up to that. Now it's turn for Martin Kern to come up here, and he's just going to give us his thoughts. He's been sitting on the front row, taking notes, listening to all of you lot, and he's going to give his thoughts on this forum. Martin, thank you.
Thank you very much, first of all, for a really passionate and insightful panel. It was really a pleasure to listen and try to keep note, and now have the ungrateful task in 2 minutes try to summarize it. But also I'd like to welcome, of course, all the guests here who are here to come to celebrate 10 years of EIT with us, both from the community and from outside. So I hope you enjoyed it so far, and we're coming indeed already to the end of the first part. Just for me, one of the secrets why we are with the EIT where we are today and have these good results and now see really the hard work paying off is, I think that we've been listening always very carefully to our stakeholders and tried to adjust the model along the way. And I think that's one of the secrets for the EIT's success so far. So in 2014, we introduced the Regional Innovation Scheme. 3 years ago, when we had INNOVEIT, we noticed that 18 out of the 19 nominees were men. So we tried to pay attention to women entrepreneurship, and I think we see the result now. We have 40% of women nominees. We have an own award coming up later on. 2 years ago, we saw that the community has grown to 6 innovation communities, and there are so many links and so many ways to work together and have synergies and value added from that we started to introduce cross-KIC cooperation and pay much more attention to synergies. And I think that's something that's coming very much on stream now. We have an EIT house in Brussels, many joint activities, for example, in the education field. And last year, of course, we consulted all of you on the EIT's future, where to go. And that's how we came up with a strategy that we submitted to the European Commission in December. Now, what to take away from this panel, because there's so many big big views and interesting dimensions. I would just take 3 of them, because I think we are now at the meeting of the 2 curves that Michael Karl showed us earlier. So I think we can continue with the EIT on the blue curve, which means we'll see more and more results, more and more students, more and more good startups, more and more success stories, or we can try to get on the exponential curve. And to get on the exponential curve, I think we have to go beyond what the EIT can do in the current model alone. For me, that means 3 things. We have to pick up on the skill side, so the education dimension. So we have to put the right skills to much more people, train much more entrepreneur, much more earlier, and also longer ways. So I think this is one of the first elements. The second one is to embed us in other ecosystems, have much more outreach, build on the regional innovation scheme, but really take all the parts of Europe along. Something we started, but I think there's much more potential for the innovation communities to become more embedded. And that, of course, includes also new programs, European Innovation Council and others. And then certainly really to focus this ecosystem and connect it to others, big investors, to make it really more powerful, to have that potential to exponential growth and also look global. You know, we started to look into the connections to Silicon Valley, China, Israel, but that is just the beginning. And in fact, these are the 3 dimensions which we put in our future strategy. We're now following very closely and, of course, nervously the negotiations. And we hope that this strategy gets adopted with the mandate and the budget that allows us to implement this ambition and get on that exponential curve. So that's what I would take away from this panel. And back to Jeremy. And I think those who are not yet convinced that the EIT delivers will get convinced when we see the innovation tour in a few minutes. Okay?
Martin Kern, Interim Director of EIT, thank you very much for that. It's time to invite our panelists to leave. We've got to watch a little film now. Would you please exit via there? We can then take your sound equipment. So now, a short film before we do the innovation tour, entitled EIT Innovators Powering Europe.
My name is Solvita Kostikova. I'm a co-founder and CEO of company Alina.
Hi, my name is Andreas. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Konox.
My name is Florence. I'm a co-founder of Crystalix Technologies, and we're a spin-out company from Imperial College here in London.
My name is Martin Steinberg. I'm heading the launch of Stockholm 3.
My name is Taavi Madiberk. I'm the CEO of Skeleton Technologies.
I think innovation is really important to solve a lot of problems because it allows us to do things differently, to do things better, to do things more efficiently.
Our mission is to empower the rail industry to operate with the highest availability. So in short, we want to make trains arrive on time.
Our aim is to build a global company to enable our eco-technology for every paint and coating producer.
I am confident when we meet 10 years from now, you will be driving a car with our fast charging ultracapacitors.
Our chemical process allows us to use waste wood as an alternative to crude oil to produce renewable chemicals, plastics and fuels.
That will revolutionize the way we diagnose men for prostate cancer.
After sustainable preservation is that it has positive, tangible result to environment.
So we've chosen to work together with EIT because I think they have a great network.
EIT has ability to support this positive impact.
I would love to see the EIT go into more different areas of innovation.
EIT has been absolutely crucial in the support to our project by helping us accelerate the broad launch 3 to 5 years by providing validation studies in several European countries.
Traceable results to all society.
They provide access to a lot of very, very unique talent.
And I think EIT brings education, entrepreneurship and the industry network very nicely together. And this is an ecosystem where I see the next industry leaders coming from.